Hi, I'm Chris Bush and my play is Hungry, coming back to the Roundabout this summer. Hungry is a play about food, class and grief and how we like to judge people based on what they consume and how they consume. As a huge foodie myself, it's a piece that feels particularly close and very personal to me. I've always tried to avoid being defined by one particular sort of style or genre of writing. I do sort of big musicals, I do a lot of large scale community work, historical pieces, contemporary drama, but I think I'm always particularly interested in telling female led stories and particularly queer female stories, which feels like it's something that we never quite get enough of on our stages. The process of making Hungry was actually a really gorgeous one. And it felt like we really had time. We were held back by the pandemic, but actually it was one of those instances where it really allowed a lot of ideas to sort of crystallize and bloom and come to light. So actually being able to develop the piece over a number of years rather than probably the 18 months that we otherwise would have had, I think really helped actually in finding a richness and complexity to it. And it's been really gorgeous working with Plough, specifically working with Katie on bringing this piece to life. I think one of my big takeaways from writing and developing Hungry was about being able to tell really quite epic stories on very sort of small and intimate stages. It feels a bit of a cliche to say that the personal is political, but I think this play is a real sort of microcosm of that. We're able to tackle some really sort of hefty themes that impact society in many different ways, but through the lens of a very close personal relationship between two women who are extremely in love and don't quite know what they need to be for each other in order to thrive. I feel like my entry point to Hungry was all about food, which is something that is always dominating. At least sort of 20 to 80% of my thoughts at any given time will be food related. It's something that I spend a huge amount of time thinking about, dreaming about, and I think there's so much judgment. It's such an emotive area, sort of what we eat and how we feel. It's sort of fair game to pass comment on what others eat. And there's something at the heart of the play, this idea of how so often it feels like the food that is the worst for us sort of nutritionally from a health standpoint is the food that's the cheapest, is the food that's most sort of readily available, and the sort of two-tier or in fact multi-tier class system really that we see throughout the a sort of food hierarchy in terms of what we deem good enough, what we deem acceptable for the masses, what we deem aspirational, how food becomes a sort of lifestyle choice rather than actually something that's just about giving us fuel to continue on. But also I think really food as an act of care, food as a sort of love language, how creating a dish for someone is such a personal, such an intimate thing, and that desire to feed and to nurture and to love being a really a fundamentally human thing as well. I think it's fair to say that we definitely don't get enough queer love on our stages. We get a lot of queer trauma, and sometimes that's a necessary and cathartic and useful thing. But I think there's something really beautiful in being able to tell a story of two characters who are in no way defined by their queerness, but are informed by it. And that feels like that's the sort of the balance for me, and to not to sort of not to sanitize, not to suggest that this relationship at the heart of Hungary is entirely rosy, but to show two queer women who care deeply for each other, who are hugely attracted to each other, who are head over heels in love with each other, and they have their own separate. They come with their own lot of baggage, but I think that's quite a beautiful and quite an important thing. When I started writing Hungry, I knew that I was writing about class, and I knew that I was writing about sort of food inequality. I knew that I was writing about queer love, and through, in fact, the sort of the makeup of the Roundabout season and conversations with the other writers, this became a play more sort of specifically about race, and became therefore in some ways about the gentrification of food systems, about sort of cultural appropriation, about lack of understanding and divides, which feels like it totally transformed and elevated and made the piece far more interesting. But with that, of course, comes a huge degree of risk and responsibility, I feel, on my part, to sort of try and tell a story authentically and sincerely. A script is really a recipe for the dish of the piece of art that's going to be made. It's the steps that get you there. It's not the finished thing. And so you can read a recipe, you can get something out of it. You've got to put it together in the right way. It's not the finished dish. The finished dish is made by a whole group of people and is reliant on different expertises, different sets of talents, different groups of life experience. I think primarily I want audiences to have a good night out coming to see Hungry. It's a play that touches on a lot of social issues, but it is, it's got a lot of humour, it's got a lot of love, a lot of heart at the end of it. And then I'd like them to all go and have dinner and break bread and get drinks and have a chat about it in the bar afterwards.